Well, welcome. You may not know it or not, but the first guest of our sort of revamped studio setup here. So
Awesome.
We're kind of excited for that.
I love being a guinea pig. So
Yes. So
this is great.
Ian Leatherman, a security strategist for Microsoft. We'll talk a little bit about the perception of Microsoft offices in our versus our offices. But I think even just hearing that there was a sort of advanced tech-driven security specialist employed at Microsoft in Connecticut was kind of surprising in the least. But thanks for joining us on 8760 and being a part of the conversation leading up to the next shaping event, where we're really trying to look at things that are ongoing currently in the state that can really manifest into economic uplift or facilitating real change in the next 10 years. I think so often we talk about what could be, and it's not as grounded in the actual reality of what could happen. So thanks for
having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about your background. We were kind of going over it, but give us the rundown of the farm upbringing to the Navy and submarines in Groton to cybersecurity and technology, and I think we saw some chief tinkerer and toilet reductionist as well.
Made up names there, but so originally started out, grew up in Idaho Falls, Idaho, which is I think like the third, maybe fourth largest city in the state. Last I checked, it was like maybe 70,000 people, right? So not huge, but it's where the Idaho National Lab is based out of. So tons of science folks and stuff there, and that was part of it, but also surrounded by farmland and potato fields and cornfields and all that stuff. The smallest cornfield corn maze I ever went to was like a quarter-mile square, right?
Oh, so they're not the same like the one I went to.
They're not the same here, yeah.
With the kids this past weekend, which was like 3 feet high, and the size of this room.
Yeah, so that was a shock when I came to the East Coast. I'm like, we don't want to go to a corn maze, and they're like, go through it in 30 minutes. Like, that's just so there was a little bit of a shock there. But yeah, and then I went to school in Boston, at Boston University, and did ROTC there with the Navy, and then from there went through the Navy's nuclear power pipeline. And ended up on submarines and out of Groton. So that's what brought me to Connecticut originally was the Navy's submarine training schools, and then I was stationed on a fast tech boat stationed out of Groton.
Yeah, a little tangent, but as a fellow terrier, I'm always curious what kind of what got you to choose BU over other options at the time? Yeah,
so honestly, it was the movie Miracle.
Really? Okay.
Is honestly when I started figuring out, again, like coming from Idaho, what got me started originally was just in the Navy was my first summer internship was out at the National Lab, and I got to go play with the old breeder reactor facilities and doing dirty bomb detection projects for DHS. And so from there I learned about all this reactor stuff was with the Navy, and so I was like, okay, I want to join the Navy to go play with nuclear reactors. And then it was, okay, how do I pay for that if I want to go to college? Well, the Navy can pay for it. Looked into the Naval Academy. From the Naval Academy, I learned about ROTC. And so then it was, okay, you could really go to any college you wanted to. And so that's literally where the movie Miracle came in. It was all the people, most of the people from that team in 1980 came from BU. And so I was like, BU has an ROTC team, or ROTC program, and they actually produce a lot of nuclear trained people with the Navy. And it was also tied to the MIT program, so it wasn't just BU, it was 6 schools in that area with MIT and Harvard and others, so it was like kind of the best of both worlds. So that's how I ended up in Boston with the RTC program.
Yeah. How was that transition from Idaho to the Northeast in a big city like Boston?
Oh, it was definitely a culture shock.
Yeah.
Because I've really only left Idaho and that area like once in my life, right? That was a vacation to New England and New York City one time, right? It was like, I was saying earlier, the biggest potato I ever had in my life from Idaho was actually at Carnegie Deli in New York City. So, no, it was definitely a culture shock. And I didn't realize how much people didn't know about Idaho until I came out there, and they're like, so many people in Boston was kind of a joke, but I really thought Idaho was a different country. So for a lot of people, thought I was a foreigner when I was in college. I'm like, no, I'm here from the U.S.
That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I think that BU and Boston in general, because there are so many schools, is such kind of a melting pot. At least when I was there, being from New York, and it was still during the height of the, Yankees Red Sox rivalry, and it was kind of a very unique experience in that they really weren't fans of New Yorkers, and it diminished my experience there at the time, but now kind of looking back, it was such an amazing spot, and I really kind of wish I took better advantage of being in it, especially going there. I graduated with 60 kids in a public school, and I was like, I gotta get out of here, and I want size and ton of people, and it got me that, and then I was kind of like, oh shit. So, okay, so then that took you to nuclear submarines.
Yeah. So I ended up doing that whole path. Was on a sub, got to go under the North Pole, or go to the North Pole under the Arctic ice, all of that stuff. And then I ended up switching careers into communications with the Navy. And so I ended up down in Suffolk, Virginia, where a lot of the Navy's communication headquarters are. And then from there, just kind of, it was that alone was a shift, right? And I think because I went from nuclear power, which is very complex, to communications, which is also complex, but it didn't have the same rigor behind it that the nuclear power program did, right? Like nuclear power is one of those things that kind of everybody realizes it's dangerous, and there's always a level of concern when it comes to it, right? You're not just going to go willy-nilly and build a nuclear reactor. But some of the communication stuff was like, oh yeah, we've been doing these communications for 50 years, and a lot of the same satellites that we use are 40, 50 years old. Nothing really changes. And so I almost got a little bored with it. And so I was like, okay, get a little bit more into the cyber element of it, which led me into cyber defense. And all of that kind of came to a head when I happened to be at the Navy's Fleet Cyber Command when COVID hit. So I was at Fleet Cyber, which is kind of the headquarters for all Navy cyber activities. And COVID hit, and we found ourselves at a huge disadvantage with how the networks are built. It was all built based on legacy, on-prem kind of castle and moat architectures. Yeah. And a lot of those basic things that were engineering design elements that I learned at BU that were really beaten into me in the Navy's nuclear power program in Charleston and Saratoga Springs, New York, all those things weren't really happening with cyber. And so that really became a huge turning point for me was, how do I take these basic engineering principles that we do in the physical world, we do with nuclear reactors, bring them into cyberspace? And COVID just created the crisis that allowed other people to come in and kind of create new. And so I was able to build a brand new network for the Navy with a lot of other actually nuclear trained people who had also switched over into the cyberspace. And so we were able to create these zero trust modeled things that I then used to pivot over into my career now with Microsoft, where took what we built with the Navy during COVID and my job has been to expand that to the entire federal government. So not just the Department of War now, but also the federal civilian agencies and the intelligence agency. And then recently that's expanded to the entire defense industrial base. And so how do we secure and make more resilient and secure all of our cyber systems across
I was going to say, for viewers, listeners, what does that mean, right? Like what is being kind of protected? Is it passwords and personal privacy, or is it drone, Russian drones? Where does that cover, or does it really touch everything?
It's kind of all of the above. So the way I like to think about it, and a lot of actually my journey in this started with my home lab tinkering, right? I think a lot of people in the cyberspace, they have that home lab. It's always tinkering. It's that goes back to that engineering mindset, right? It's reverse engineering a VCR in high school, or if it's doing the same thing with ones and zeros and computers. But it started out as a project of how do I build a home security system for my family when I'm gone, but my wife wanted that comfort of a home security system. I didn't like the idea of using ADT or any of these other kind of traditional services, because I don't want some random person in a call center in India or Pakistan or pick your country to know, am I home or not? Partially because of me being active duty at the time, right? There was just, I didn't like that concept. So I started building this as I want to have my own security system. And so it kind of leads to the, how does zero trust and cybersecurity play into all of this? Well, we're traditional home security systems, you have door and window sensors, right? Did somebody break in through my door or did they break the window? What happens if they drive a truck between your windows and they miss the door and window sensors? That wouldn't alarm, right? And that was the fundamental problem we had with cybersecurity is all these sensors and the way we build these networks and constructs where I'm going to see them come through my front door to rob my house. And we missed these creative things, like things that weren't even thought of, like drones or other attack vectors. And so this other concept was, oh, I need other sensors in there. And so that's kind of where it comes to everything is we're expanding out all these other sensors. It's not just door and window sensors to your home. It's temperature sensors. It's CO2 sensors. It's having cameras. Like, do you actually know what's happening in your property? And that's the physical equivalent of what we're doing in cyber. It's really, do you know what's happening in all of the cyber estate that you're touching? Whether you physically own it, like it's inside this building, or you're using it in a cloud or somebody else's server, you need to have that awareness so you can detect an anomaly, but then also defend it if there is an anomaly.
How fast is that now becoming difficult to keep up with?
Oh, it's
Has it accelerated given
Absolutely.
the advent of technology and AI and connectivity and everything else?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard before. So I would say even pre-large language model AI stuff of the last 2 to 3 years, I would, you know, coming from like the nuclear power side, I was always telling people like this cybersecurity stuff is harder than nuclear power. And I think that's another thing that relates to people because like nuclear power is hard, physics PhDs, and you know that's kind of how the stereotype you think of nuclear physicists and nuclear power. But reality is you don't have an active adversary in a nuclear reactor, right? You have neutrons that are behaving as in a predictable manner, statistically driven, and they're not trying to say, I'm going to move in a different way to attack you. And so in cyberspace, I have far more moving parts, I have far more things that are changing, the technology is always changing, and I have an active adversary or multiple active adversaries that are actually trying to abuse the system. So it's far harder, and so it's, yeah, absolutely, I think one of the cultural things that we've had a challenge with across, not just in the US, but across the country is we haven't given cyber the respect that it deserves, as it should have the same kind of fear, hair on the back of your neck factor that nuclear power does. And it's getting there, but it's not quite baked into everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, then with AI, it's everything just moves that much faster, right? We're building AI tools to defend, adversaries using AI tools to attack, and it's becoming machine versus machine even more than ever.
Well, it seems like, you know, you bring up like sort of the battlefield, right? And it's like you also then have all of these third parties that are not in formation with you, right? Yep. Because they have their own agendas, their own challenges, their own concerns of, you know, security or whatever it is. So they're not really helping you in any way, right? It's just, it's creating more factors and variables for you to account for.
Exactly.
Can you guys pause for just a minute? Somebody's trying to, Rob is trying to get on our TV.
Yeah, you're good.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
There we go. You want to ask that again?
I don't remember what I said.
We're just
Just talking about, you know, when if you're comparing it to battle, that, you know, there's at least a strategy and formation and teams with different objectives, and you know now you have to account for private and public sector, corporations, organizations, all with different agendas, kind of just inhibiting any real progress. It seems like.
Oh, and it's not just. I mean, a lot of this goes to.
Right.
You know, a lot of people refer to it as the fifth domain of warfare for a reason. Is it's that next level, right? We used to think it was sea, air, land, and then we added space to that. Now we're adding cyberspace to that. But as part of that is cyberspace is everybody is there, right? Like we have personal stuff. You have people hijacking your TV that are friendly. That's friendly fire right there, right? Like I mean, so it's like, where is the adversary? They could be unwitting adversaries that are actually inside part of a coworker, or it could be actually somebody from another nationality that's trying to do it, and they can do it now from the comfort of their home, and they don't have to put their physical body at risk to actually have an effect in your country, right? And so it's tremendously complex, and then when you add the legal stuff to it, I mean, it's there's just so many moving parts, but then also the technology is always changing, right? And that's the biggest thing is nuclear power, like those physics are the same from when we figured it out in the 60s, 50s, and 60s, right? The tech fundamentally hasn't changed. But with cyber, like every 3 months there's something new. I mean, we didn't even have this AI large language model concept 3 years ago, right? And now everybody's got it, and it's on your phone, and it's democratized where anybody can use it.
And it seems like at least from how you're describing it, that to a certain extent you're forced to react fairly contemporaneously with the public at large, where the assumption's always the government or these powerful corporations are 10 years in advance, and they're thinking through, and they've solved all these challenges already. But maybe that was once true, but it feels like that's not necessarily the case these days.
Yeah, no, exactly. And a lot of the early computing tech, right, it was built by the government, or was built by ARPA and defense type things. I mean, some of the first computer programming that was done was like by a Navy admiral at Harvard, right, with Grace Hopper. And now a lot of that innovation is happening in the private sector, and there's still an arms race, so to speak, right? We're like, look at quantum. It's okay, we need to build quantum. A lot of that's being driven by private industry. Government is helping and supporting, but they're not driving the effort necessarily, right? And it's not fully controlled, right? A lot of things that we take for granted today, like GPS, they were controlled government efforts. And so, yeah, it's a lot of reactive, and some of it's it makes for an exciting life. The career is never boring, but it also goes to why there's constant tinkering, right? Like one of my titles was like chief tinkerer. It's like, if I'm not tinkering at home and getting the wife approval factor on the stuff I'm building, then it sure as heck can't scale to millions of people at the enterprise level, right?
Sure.
And so there's just an iterative loop in all of this.
What are the greatest threats right now to cybersecurity and the challenges that you guys face, trying to develop and advance it?
I think there's a few layers to that. I would say, there's obviously the active adversaries, right? So from a United States standpoint, there are countries that don't like us, they never will. They're using cyber as a very low cost way to impact us. And whether that's through straight up attacks, like, I'm going to attack your house, or it's, I'm going to influence you and try to get you to, as you drive to school today, I want you to take this road because I'm waiting there with something else, right? And, those are kind of physical examples, but those happen in cyberspace. I want you to read these news articles, not these.
Right.
Those are all part of this like bigger cyber umbrella. But then there's also the challenge of this does move fast, and I'm forced, because of my day job, I'm forced to move fast to keep up with it, to keep a job at Microsoft, right? Like if you're not using the tech, like get out.
Right.
But a lot of society isn't there, right? And I think that's the struggle that we get with where this impacts state, local, and other folks like that's not at the national levels. The U.S. government as a whole has, or even Microsoft has, a lot of resources to have cyber experts to be defending and doing these things. One of the real threats we have is where you don't have expertise. And so when we moved to Monroe, one of the first things I did, kind of selfishly, is, okay, if I'm going to be living here, I'm going to be in this town, I want to make sure that my data is safe, that as I give that to the town and I register my car and I do all this other stuff, like, are they doing the right things? And so I was able to just go look and say, how is the town doing business? How is the state doing business, right? Because my data is going to be there. And all this from publicly accessible, we call it open source intelligence, right?
I already thought about that.
Just poking around. And so it was one of those things I just poked around, like, okay, I'm moving to this state, moving to this town. How bad is it in cyberspace, right? Knowing what I know and just poking around, and found a ton of various holes, right? And so luckily, like, Monroe's been great. First selectman there has been super receptive, like, hey, you guys have all these gaps, and this is what I see from the outside. I imagine it's worse if you look on the inside, right? And I'm not going to go break into your stuff to see how well you're doing stuff, but like, from the outside you can tell a lot. Almost like you can tell get a sense for security of a home
Yeah.
from the outside, right? It's kind of the same concept. And so they've spent money on funding things and improving processes and done great stuff there. But the education part is a huge weakness, right? Is if people don't know what the basics are, what proper engineering looks like, or what proper defense looks like, they can't know that they have a gap. And those gaps are actually what puts us all in danger, where, whether it's a water supplier, or power grid supplier, or, U.S. national can't defend against Russia or China trying to take out the water system, right? But do we have people at the local level who know that that's a risk and know how to defend it and have that expertise? That becomes a threat, right? So
It becomes like the public education of the value of that, and then
Yeah.
The being on the receiving end or the participating end of various municipality website RFP redesign, for our redesign RFPs in my career, they're certainly not structured in a way where someone with your background or your thinking has thought through, vulnerability aspects. It's a kind of a blanket, like, must be secured, and right, but it's but what does that really mean, right?
And a lot of people are learning that kind of the hard way, right? So North Carolina, last Christmas time, they had a huge breach. Not just, it wasn't North Carolina, it was one of their third-party vendors for the school system, right? It was I can't remember which one, but it was one of the, I think Connecticut uses it for their school systems, but it was one of those, how do you communicate with parents and students and do all of that?
Like a blackboard,
like kind of like a
something like that,
blackboard.
yeah.
It was one, but it was more for like the K through 12 system, right? And North Carolina was hit really hard by that, and it was not the state's fault. It was their software provider. So then they start looking into that, of like, what did the contract say, and did we have all these rules in place, and did we do our due diligence to make sure that we're hiring in this vendor to take our student, teacher, parent data, and so they learned that very quickly. They established a state like security response team and all of these things. So they learned the hard way. But I think that's where I'm trying to bring that, starting at my town, but also like at the state level. What is the state doing about this? There are National Guard initiatives that kind of help a little bit. New England has some great things there. They've got an annual training that's called Cyber Yankee every year. That's all the New England states. But again, it's like, to your point of the RFPs, like, is it in the basics there of, hey, who's liable when certain things happen? And are you also creative enough in there to expect scenarios that nobody's ever thought of, but that adversary sitting in Russia or China might be thinking of, right? And,
and
it's not just a tech thing, right? I guess that's the other thing is this applies to everybody. This isn't just a, cyber's a nerdy ones and zeros thing. It's in
I think
everybody.
that brings it home,
thing,
right? I mean, so often people think of, even in the conversation of Microsoft, it's like high technology and enterprise level technology, and then what you're talking about is this is aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, nuclear family, your kid's education and everything else that is still a potential outlet or breakpoint, and that it seems like we're kind of talking about where we could make progress over the next decade or so, and you're setting the groundwork in Monroe, but having some SOPs or policies, or maybe it becomes part of the higher ed curriculum in one of the state schools where there's a consultant element to these town tech and infrastructure approaches. Because I imagine that not only did North Carolina have egg on its face, right, as far as data getting out, but there's economic loss, there's a huge impact and ripple effect.
Right. And that's one of those things that, if I kind of was king for a day and could choose what Connecticut needs to do, right, I would be like, nowhere is really industry, or when you think of like cyber innovation, right, you don't think of Connecticut. You're thinking of Reston, Virginia, you're thinking of the Seattle, Redmond area. You've got San Antonio now in Texas. Like, those are really three big places that are doing a lot of cyber and cybersecurity stuff across all levels, right? So not just academic, but like Texas just stood up a cyber guard for the state, right? So they're like, hey, we're not going to rely on the U.S. government to do this. We also need a state guard to support the schools, the businesses, things that aren't going to reach the national level, right? And so it's, okay, what are we going to do there from a Connecticut team, whether it's a cyber guard through using like state militia laws or whatever, but like something there to understand like when things go bad, they go bad really fast and you need a team ready to go, right? Whether that's the power grid goes down, water is poisoned, or even just ransomware attack, and now, you know, pick a big city or town here that can't issue permits,
Right.
and all building has come to a stop, right? But just thinking through these scenarios and saying, what would we do, right? And the tabletops, and I haven't seen that yet in Connecticut, right? We've got a ton of great long-term industry here, especially with defense industrial base, but all those companies are still on their own, and what I see is a lot of their cyber talent they need to defend those companies that are here in Connecticut, they're actually down in Virginia, Northern Virginia, or the DC area, right? So even though I'm in Connecticut and these companies are in Connecticut, great nationally known companies, I actually have to drive down to DC to go meet with them about cybersecurity, right? And so that's just kind of this mismatch that I think as a whole across the state, like it's not going away, right? It's something that it's where a ton of growth is. We have a ton of physical industry here.
Yep.
Why wouldn't we just help nudge the cyber part to it and say, you know, when you think of cyber, like there's no reason Connecticut couldn't be that place, right?
It seems ripe for opportunity there from the conversations that we've been a part of through the various shaping events. And if it feels like probably not uncommon, but it's gotten it's politicized, right? And there's either, if we loosen regulations on innovation and application of technology for any case, then kids' nude photos are going to end up online, right?
Yeah.
But like, or if we have any policy, then we're going to stifle all innovation and nothing's going to be possible. And that's where, when you were talking about sort of the angle of, you know, it being almost, we're going to take it out of this conversation, and it's not going to be a policy, but this is going to be, you know, for defense, right? Or this is going to be because of a public emergency or whatever it may be. Like, is that a way around some of the red tape? You know,
I think politics tends to fill a void where there's no data, and that kind of led to even, you know, some of our COVID response when I was active duty with the Navy, and the way that even the U.S. government at the time was approaching cyber. Right, it was like we think here's what we should do based on what we think looks right or what these architectures are. We didn't have the data to say here's what's actually happening. And so once we got a lot of this data and deployed those granular sensors, then we actually could make better policy decisions because we had the data to go with it. And it became far less politicized at that point because it was, you know, here's the facts of what's happening. We need to go do this, right? And so that leads to really kind of how I've been doing this zero trust stuff and federal government is just get these sensors out there, right? So the equivalent would be when you go to, you know, at your house, okay, put cameras everywhere across your yard. And now you're not gonna have that fight to say, well, how should we defend the house? You actually have the data to say, okay, I have
how am I being attacked?
coyotes.
And then I can
Exactly,
figure it
that's
out.
the thing, is
Yeah.
what is the threat, right? And so it's like, when I was in Maryland at my, you know, before moving to Connecticut, the threat was not bears and coyotes and everything that's in my backyard now, but people would actually come check your lock at 2 a.m. and see if the door was unlocked, right? And so the way you want to even think about simple things like home security, like I needed a way to make sure confirm that my door was always locked. So it's like, I'm gonna automate that, right? So it's, how do you now have the data to where it's not a question of what should I do? It's right there, it's obvious. I need an automation to go confirm my door is always locked at 2 a.m. Here, my door being unlocked or unlocked doesn't matter. It's more of, okay, are my kids outside? Do I see a bear when my kids are outside? That's the thing I worry about. It has nothing to do with door locks, right?
Sure.
but you need that data to then be able to strategize. And I think that goes to how the state should approach things. And, you know, 3.5 years I've been here, I see a lot of rhetoric, right? And I haven't seen the data. And so it goes to what I first started doing with Monroe. It's like, okay, here's, you know, Terry Rooney, great guy, took him the data, and he's like, you're right, we do need to fix this, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't become political at that point. It has nothing to do with town politics. It's, here's these problems, I didn't realize it, here's the data, let's move forward.
Well, because it feels
And
like
we just need to do
there's
more of that,
fear
right?
in the buzzword,
Right.
Where it was like, if we're going to solve this problem, or, you know, the scaffolding of city and municipality websites that
Right.
are constantly, you know, down anyway, right? Or further securing kids' information for, you know, in school districts, like
Right.
that's okay. Like, and what are
there's-
you going to use to do that? A bunch of tech that we don't understand? That's fine, as long as it serves that purpose.
Right. And that's where, like, a lot of these things you can have the best of both worlds, right? We're doing a lot of data sovereignty stuff where you can say your data stays at the school or in the town and it's not going to all these other places to be politicized if your data could be used nefariously too, but also still getting the benefits of higher level, like a higher level view, right? So it's, hey, I'm looking at the state and I want to defend all the schools in the state while recognizing each town has their own kind of sovereignty of how they want to do education. You can still say, here's the threats to the state. Hey, everybody be looking for these things. Maybe automate that process while the data still stays there and the state doesn't know which school districts are, you know, at risk or not. Like, but there's ways to do that, right? But right now it's, instead of even doing that basic thing of what's the status, it's you shall use our one path of, you know, all the traffic shall go through this one thing that the state controls, and it's like there's no middle ground, right? And that creates the politicization of it.
What role has Microsoft taken? You know, obviously, there's the association of Office and Copilot and you know, certain in Bing or whatever, right? But
Yep.
like, and can see security applications in those different tools. But obviously, Microsoft is a much bigger enterprise. So where are you focusing, or where, you know, how is Microsoft approaching it?
Yeah, so a lot of these things that kind of we were talking about earlier is like kind of weaknesses or problems in cybersecurity. Like that's a lot of what we're trying to do. So it's education parts. Like we're taking what we've learned from Xbox and like making games and like how do we gamify cyber education? How do we gamify programming? How do we turn that now into AI agents? And so
Clippy, the AI agent.
yeah, you know, exactly. Like there's the sky's the limit now, right? And it's what I do even with my kids is like my oldest is still getting to that, you know, she's just starting to read chapter books and all that. Well, that we've got to, well, not quite cyber security related. It's like, well, in order to actually do all this stuff, you need to know how to read. And you need to know how to read well. So, hey, we've got an AI program that will let you read and you speak it, and it will tell you what words were you struggling on, and start to automate some of that. And so it's using, how do we like bring in that education? So then we take that same tech and we're like, now it's time to go learn a programming language. So I take my, you know, she's starting with chapter books. Well, now she's already learning programming languages with some of that same AI-based education. So we're doing some of that, but then also there's also the security part of it, which is what are some of our weakest parts of our country and infrastructure. And so we have rural hospital initiatives or helping secure rural hospitals, because if you think like local municipalities are struggling, like, you know, take a hospital in the middle of nowhere that is, they barely have somebody running their network, let alone defending it, right? And so we're trying to automate some of those things, and then those lessons learned we can push down. And I'm personally working on some initiatives with critical infrastructure, and there's a lot of parallels of how do we defend ships and tactical systems on the Department of War side, and then how do we bring that to water and power, and there's a lot of cross-pollination there. So I would say it's just trying to raise
Pretty
all ships,
distributed.
right?
Yeah.
It's we can't just solve one of these problems; they all have to be solved together, and we're using technology to try to do that as much as possible.
And it feels like Microsoft is actually a really great entity to be a symbol for that evolution because there's the historical credibility, the enterprise and sort of shareholder, metric and transparency, and there's a feel. It feels like to me that there can be as unbiased as there can be position and policy and threshold established from a company like Microsoft, where there's seemingly lack of trust, or in some of the more emergent organizations, right, or less track record, or more personal agenda, or it seems like Microsoft's kind of grown past that, right? It's like, we're big enough, like we don't actually have to,
Honestly, that's one of the things that drew me to Microsoft, like when I was leaving active duty, right? It was like, okay, where do I go now? Microsoft really, I gravitated to Microsoft because of kind of some of those cultural things. Is as a company, and now that I've been here, I've seen under the hood a little bit more, I kind of see why they had that perception, right? But a lot of it, I would say, goes back to the data. If you present these things and say, here's the facts, here's the, why is Microsoft saying we're going to pick on rural hospitals? Well, here's the data. Russia's going after them. They need defended. They have these games. That now becomes an apolitical issue because you're presenting the facts, right? And everybody can get along with that. And so I think that's one of the things the company's done really well. And I've been lucky to be a part of a lot of those initiatives is, I need to go solve this problem. Water and power are a problem. I'm empowered to go solve it because I brought the facts there. And it doesn't matter if it's a state like Connecticut or a state like Texas, completely different ends of the political spectrum in most cases. It needs solved in both cases. And you know what? We're going to use tech to solve it. Let's keep politics out because we have the data, right? And so I think it goes with that mindset of if you're doing data-driven engineering operations, things get less political pretty quick. And I think Microsoft does a good job at that.
What kind of challenges, like going back to what I said before, what kind of challenges have you guys been seeing at Microsoft to, advance this?
Great question. I mean, honestly, like the education part is still a struggle even for us, right? Yeah. So like this tech is coming out rapidly. It's changing. We're innovating like crazy. I still have to keep up with the tech, right? I have to keep educated. And so like, there's only so much I can do with tinkering and everything else, but like, luckily I get exposed to some of the latest toys before they go out,
Yeah.
But I still got to learn it, right? And now you're doing that with the constant fire hose of brand new technology, new concepts. You've got to go learn all that stuff, relearn some of the, programming behind it, or in some cases, like with some of the quantum stuff we're doing, like I'd go back and relearn the physics on some of this because we create a new state of matter, like that we're using in our quantum chips now. I mean, that's like going back to the drawing board. So it's kind of we have to keep everybody educated. So we do one of the cool things that I like is like Fridays are learning days. So corporate wide is blocked off that Fridays, like it is your protected time. You need to go learn so that you can keep up with the tech to go build the next thing to go solve a problem. And so that's still the biggest challenge I would say is how do you, and if it's that hard to train employees who know they're working for a tech company who are also tech inclined to be working there in the first place, now imagine how hard it is for everybody else in the world to keep up. If we can't even keep up, how the heck is everybody else,
and you're
right?
constantly like, you have to be on the front edge of early adopter, kind of maintain a conversation and be, the early minority.
Yep.
But then ultimately you're playing to the laggards and the late majority, right? Because like that's to your point earlier, like we all sort of drink our own Kool-Aid being infused in technology or digital or data or media every day, but 95% of the country and population aren't. And they're really only adopting it once it's at mass. So
yeah, and that's where being on the security side is this other angle is like a lot of people building this tech, they're thinking of how they're going to use it for, to solve world hunger or, big human problems. And they don't, most folks don't typically have that, like, how could I use this nefariously, right? And that's kind of where I've come in and where my military background has come into play is like, this is really cool. Like when we first had the large language model stuff and it's like, this is really cool. It can solve a lot of problems, but here's how it can be used nefariously. And so that's where on the security side, it's not just keeping up with that and what's the tech, but also how could somebody be creative and use this nefariously, and what actually does that create as potentially new societal problems or new technology problems? And then now it doesn't matter that 95% of the country hasn't adopted the tech, the adversary has. And so the adversary is now, driving the sports car while you're still on a horse and buggy, and you're wondering why you're getting outpaced by,
That's still gotta
another
be a
nation
fun
state.
role to be in, though, right? It's like you go into an internal meeting and people are like, "Oh, look what we got," and you're like, "Yeah, but have you thought about this, 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 and this?" Go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, but it's kind of fun, but then at the same time, you're always that tinfoil hat naysayer, right? And they're like, "Oh, you're just wearing the tinfoil hat," and it's like, yeah, here's my resume. Like 9 times out of 10, the tinfoil hat is correct. Like it's fun, but when it's every day, people just start to be like, "Oh yeah, I'm so proud of my new capability," and you're just gonna tell me why it's horrible, and how somebody's gonna use it nefariously, right? So it's interesting.
Do you like learning the new? Like, obviously, I'm assuming you like learning the new tech, but does it get frustrating after a while, or does it keep you motivated to keep chasing different goals and new technology?
It's something, honestly, I've had to learn with. And I think that's where without a good support structure, it can be exhausting, right? And their burnout is high, right? Just in the tech sector right now, but also cybersecurity, right? Is not just is the tech changing, but the adversary is getting better. The adversary finds a way to break in, and then I've got to be the one to go call somebody, the CISO of a global company, and be like, "Hey, we found, using our sensors, we found that you were broken into, and we're here to help." Like, some of that gets exhausting, but ultimately, yeah, I love it. It's every time there's something new, it's a new way to look at things, right? There's a lot of things that I just had a huge backlog of. I wish I could do this things, right? Like, and I always kind of joked years ago that my catchphrase was like, "I wish I had a fleet of interns," right? Like, I could do so much more if I had give me 1,000 high school interns. I could go do some crazy stuff. Well, then we got all the large language model stuff, and now I actually have like 1,000 high school, college level, interns at my disposal with AI, and it's allowed me to do that much more. But there's always something new, so it's a vicious cycle, and it's the if I wasn't making it somewhat personal, I think I would have lost my sanity by now. But it's like, I'm going to do this first and foremost. I'm doing it for my family. I'm solving a family problem and using it to teach my kids. Do something there, and that's what keeps me grounded. And then I'm able to take that and say, okay, I've proven this works. I know how this could solve a problem. Now let's take it and scale it to a 5 million user enterprise, right? Something like that.
You mentioned earlier, to kind of turn to a second to Connecticut specifically, how most of your colleagues, right, are down in Virginia or DC area. What, from your perspective, has Microsoft's view of a presence in Connecticut, been, and are there conversations of it being an opportunity or a loss leader? I don't know, whatever the word may be, but.
Well, so I think a lot of this changed with COVID, right, in general, because Microsoft, I think a lot of places were unique here, but Microsoft closed a lot of their office buildings. They're like, let's rely on remote work. And so Microsoft did have a building in Hartford, and then that got closed as part of the COVID stuff. It was like, why would we lease a building here? So a lot of the Microsoft presence in Connecticut is folks who are here working out of their homes. There isn't an office building in the state. I think the closest, if I have to really go to an office building, it's either New York City or it's Boston, right? So it's a lot of working from home, or you're going to go travel to where the customer is. And I think that's a lot of it here is the reason Microsoft is here and people are employees at Microsoft here in the state is because there's big companies that we need to go support, and we're going to be there on site and go support them. But other than that, like, it's not where you're going to have, cutting edge stuff necessarily, right? And so, but I think there's an opportunity to evolve that. I don't see why that, like, and I will say even for me, right? The reason I'm in Connecticut has nothing to do with the state. It was my wife's family's from here. multiple generations back, and that's why they are still here. Is it's where all the family is, and so I'm not in Connecticut because of Microsoft. I'm in here because of family, and then Microsoft was able to allow that
Kind of
and say
accommodate,
we can support you, as needed. But I think that's really where it should change, right? I've met a lot of amazing people here who are scattered all over the state that are in our now Microsoft like Connecticut chat, right? We compare ice cream shops and like whatever from all the state, but the kind of the story's the same. Is like we'll try to have meetups around the state every once in a while, but it's work to say like, yeah, we are Microsoft here, and we're all doing these events as side projects, right? Like helping my town is a side project. That's not necessarily corporate
Right,
sponsored.
right.
That's because I care about it. A lot of stuff that others are doing, like the STEM program in Hartford, that's a side project. That's a volunteer project. Company supports it. They match time. They match money, but it's not like part of a bigger corporate strategy. And so, and I think that's, again, if I was king for a day with the state, I would be like, attract cyber top talent, even if they are working from home. Like make it to where it's like, you know what, you have that tech job and you're working from home, like you should want to live in Connecticut. This is the place for you. There's really not that appeal, right? Outside of family for most people.
Sure. Well, I guess from your unique perspective, like are there areas of industry that could actually be enticing for Microsoft to take notice? If we were to lean into it, given what we have here.
Yeah, honestly, I think, I know I'm a little biased on this because of my military background, but I think Connecticut has some amazing defense industrial base folks, right? I mean, you've got Sikorsky over here, you've got Raytheon, there's a lot of globally known names that are not just key for the state as from a tax and revenue standpoint, but honestly for our national security, right? Like if these companies that are in Connecticut aren't able to do their job, that's actually a national impact, right? And so, or even the sub base out of New London, Groton area, like those are really critical areas. And I think there's just a little, it's hard for them to kind of grow outside of what they've been doing here for decades, right? They're not going to say, hey, I'm going to go invest in a data center in Connecticut because price of electricity is way too high here. I'm going to go build that somewhere else, right? So I think, but I think that's the industry that I'd never see in the Connecticut documentation. I don't see it in even this effort, right? I don't see like the DIB. We talk about all these other parts, but those companies are really, they're the companies that won us World War II. They're the companies that are going to be foundational to World War III, if and when that ever happens. But like, that's where I would spend a little bit more love and energy as the state, because they are truly critical to at the national level. When you go to the national level and say, why Connecticut? Because we have these, right? Otherwise, it's, okay, we've got the insurance industry. Nobody really likes them right now. So, like.
But it goes back to what we continue to sort of surface, right? Is like, it's the identity problem or lack of, and, Microsoft corporate isn't getting sort of swayed, or they're not, their heads aren't turning at what's going on in Connecticut right now.
Right.
And I think there's, as you've identified, a ton of opportunities, but kind of takes, in this case, state, private, and someone from outside of the state to all have an interest in trying to actually make something work, right?
Yep.
And feels like there's chicken or egg right now, where the talent's not here. So,
Right.
well, we have to entice the talent. So,
Exactly.
right, it's a little bit of that back and forth. But I mean, as we were talking, you have ASSA ABLOY, and it's all lock mechanisms and different forms of remote and connected, entry and exit systems. So it seems like there's opportunities there. There's even in the medical space, the medical device. I'm sure that those are at risk of getting hacked, and there's PII on those, and right. So there's seemingly so many opportunities for these, these these entities to get together, and how we surface that or how we can define that so it's actionable might be, you got to lead the horse to water, so to speak.
Right. And I think that's, again, if I was doing this, and again, I'm very biased in this just because I'm an engineer and all of this stuff too, but like focus on the tangible tech side of it, right? Like Kinetic's got a lot of great stuff there, but we just never market it. A lot of actually engineering friends I had coming out of BU actually ended up in Connecticut working at some of these big factory DIB type places. But again, they were drawn here because of a job. But when you have people like in the tech world who are working remotely or can work from anywhere, would they pick Connecticut, right? And I think if we can change that calculus, I think everything else starts to improve, because we want to draw in a crowd that brings, not because you start to solve all these other problems with it, right? If you're bringing in people who are in a very technical space, then they're also going to help out at high school career fairs or help mentor people and be like, hey, let's go start a programming class, or yeah, you need help with a robotics group, like great, you have people with that body of knowledge, but you can't start having that trickle down effect to other parts of society if you don't have those people here in the first place. And if they're like, hey, I can work from anywhere, I'm going to go work out of the mountains in West Virginia. Well, why not pick a mountain in Connecticut, right?
Yeah. It's almost a little bit of a longer game, but identifying the ideal talent type, kind of profiling them, and then creating an ecosystem and community that is unique to something that they're looking for, and start to get some concentration of a certain type of talent. Well, then it makes sense for a business to invest and open up office space and everything else.
Yep.
Whereabouts in Connecticut could you see there be a little bit of a tech market? Would it be around those places like Sikorsky, Raytheon, or is there maybe an unknown place in the state that you can see them building?
Yeah, I think that would be the place to start,
Yeah.
because you've already got a lot of people who are there, or they visit there often, right? They might not live there, but they're visiting there potentially from other parts of the country to go to those plants. I would kind of start there, but I think it would also be, use some of the natural geographic niceness that Connecticut has, right? Like there's a lot of beautiful areas here, right? I mean, that's ultimately how I ended up in Monroe, is like, want a place that it's kind of a little rural field, but we're like at the base of, a mountain, and it's like hiking trails and all of that. Like that's kind of what drew us there. What's interesting is out in Idaho, Department of Homeland Security started a lot of their cyber stuff out there with Idaho National Lab, and so I saw a lot of this stuff growing up. Is people are moving out to Idaho literally because of how close it was to Yellowstone, the rivers, the mountains, and they work from home, and they were taking brilliant experts from all over the world, and they're like, hey, you should come to Idaho because you can have a house on a hill and work from home and have this amazing view. But that was the selling point, right? And so, I think, yes, we could talk about like the DIB type places there, but also like, hey, there's some really cool areas here. Be like, hey, here's some scenery. Like you should come here because, we do have reliable connectivity and power and all this, and you can work from home and have a great view and have hiking in your backyard, right? But that it's a little bit of a different thing, is understanding who are you trying to recruit, what value are they bringing, not just I want a barn downtown. Like not everybody's looking for that.
No, but profiling them to who would also be more interested in rehabbing, certain, the areas that they're investing in, and we're trying to sort of kill two birds with one stone when you start looking at areas like Bridgeport or New London and Groton that are kind of known for not being, the most, I don't know how to say it, right? The nicest areas, but they're on the shoreline. They have this great potential. They're throughputs and home to many, current companies in Connecticut, and it just seems like they're just constantly overlooked. So, you know, is there unique opportunities there for folks?
Right. And then one of the other things too is like from a secure space standpoint, if you are trying to bring in people who are bringing in like federal dollars and have to have that secured space, like some of these companies have done it for themselves and where they are, but there's not a way to expand, right? Outside of, there's a lot of money that goes into secure spaces, but like something I've seen San Diego do is sponsor companies that are doing like kind of like WeWork type spaces, right? Where it's like open office space, but it's also accredited for federal cleared sensitive type things where you can come in and do that ad hoc. I think that could be something that the state's able to do and say, hey, here is our tech epicenter. You work from home 90% of the time, but if you need to come in and do that thing, you can come here. And with it comes federal dollars or other national dollars that now come into to the state, and again would leverage that kind of DIB focus. But that's you know, right now it's either going to Boston or to DC pretty much to do that work right now. We could kind of be that place in between, that you don't need to go all the way to DC or you don't need to go all the way to Boston. Folks from New York actually would come here to do that work, right? Because it doesn't really exist in the city. So,
And even just, you know, I forget exactly which schools within the system, but, you know, for one of the cybersecurity events, it was highlighted that some of the three-letter agencies were partnering with Connecticut schools for, you know, innovation and cybersecurity curriculum. So, you know, in that case, they're open to it. You know, maybe there's room available. You know, so like if you want to test out Connecticut, right, like you kind of can be an RA and get free housing, but also, you know, kind of contribute as a professor or adjunct.
And that's one of those things, like that the NSA's CIS program is awesome, right? They're in tons of schools, and the fact that some of those accredited programs are in Connecticut is huge. But then what happens to those folks that go through that program? Okay, you went through the cyber program, you got hired, you're now going to go live in Maryland, right? We don't have an ability to keep that talent that was grown in our schools in the state. And so that's one of the things, like, okay, you just got this program, you're cleared, NSA's blessed you, you're up and coming. We're actually going to keep you in Connecticut, you can work here, and you're going to go help in these programs, right? And so I think that's part of thinking about this pipeline is we don't just want people to go to school here. We don't just want people to come visit or to go build a factory here, but like come to school here, get trained up on these nationally accredited and renowned system or platforms and curriculums, but now also come stay here, build a life here, build a family, work here, and you can still do that mission that brought you to that NSA program in the first place to that degree. Like, I mean, that's what brought me to the Navy. What still keeps me going with Microsoft is it's about, you know, I'm not just building tech for the sake of building tech. It's to defend the country, to have that mission. That's a driver for so many people. And you want to make it as easy as possible for people to get that personal value, meet that mission, defend the country, and be able to do that from Connecticut, right? And if you do that, I think there's a lot of people that would love to do it. It's just there's a lot of friction there, right? And even if you start doing, you know, not to bring up the tax thing, but like it's still a like huge elephant in the room, I'd say, for the state is it was okay for us to move from Maryland to Connecticut because it was about the same, right? And I had being a nuke, giant Excel sheets of what is this actually going to mean if we move here from a tax standpoint. But if you're moving from any other state besides Maryland or California to Connecticut, it's a shock, right? With what it takes to actually live here, from tax, price of electricity, all of those things.
I was blown. The car tax thing.
The car tax, like
oh, geez.
that I've got I still drive a 10-year-old Chevy Equinox, and I'm still paying hundreds of bucks a year on that. And like, this thing is barely usable.
I was just blindly going through law school and then got a bill for 3 years worth of car tax, and I was like, "What are you talking about?"
It's one of those things, but like that's got to be accounted for, right? Because especially if you're trying to bring in talent that is working, you know, very high pace, nationally needed missions, they're going to be paid well for it too, because they're top talent. The last thing you want those people to be is like, yeah, okay, so I'm going to go to Connecticut, I'm going to pay all these taxes, I'm going to pay 3 times my rate for electricity that I was paying in my last state,
Right.
and I still have to go travel every week to go to a facility where I can actually go do my work, right? If all those things don't match up, it doesn't. You're not going to bring in that talent, right? And so I think it has to be stated as much as that starts getting political. States are in competition with other states, and it was a calculus for us, right? It was like, do we stay in Maryland or do we move to Connecticut? And it was pretty much a wash, but Texas is looking really nice right now too. Hey, they're standing up a cyber thing. Maybe we go to Texas.
Well, and that's where, to your point of like, how do you walk that line, and what incentives can you offer or not? But the state surplus properties or these areas that need rehab and investment, take a page out of what Italy and everyone else is doing, where it's like, here's your property for $1, but you got to spend 60% of your time here over the next 5 years, and
we're not going to tax you on the improvements for 5 years
right,
on
exactly,
that too, right?
So it's like, get folks here, and then realize that what we will earn on them, and down the line, will far exceed and quite honestly, we're wasting money. Upkeeping these abandoned properties anyway.
Another thing I would say is too, price of electricity I think that was really the killer for me when I came up here.
Should have moved to Wallingford.
Price of oil, price of electricity, right? But you think about that of like, why couldn't Connecticut be the leader for nuclear power plants in the country, right? Especially because, hey, you've got all these trained people who are at the submarine base in Groton. Hey, if they want to leave, you know what? Stay in Connecticut, and we can get you a job working at a nuclear reactor here. And there's no reason Connecticut shouldn't have the cheapest electricity in the country. Now, all of a sudden, when a company's like, where should I go build a data center? They're going to say, I'm going to go build it in Connecticut because they have dirt cheap electricity, right? And that's where, even from Microsoft's standpoint, right, we're spinning back up 3 Mile Island, because AI uses a ton of power, and nuclear is the best way to do that from a zero emission standpoint, right? So it's, hey, we're going to go spin this back up and use all of that for data centers. But you have the talent in the state to do that. There's 4 sites across the country where you're going to bring that talent. One of them is in Connecticut. Use it, right? So things like that are, again, me thinking out loud.
That's those policy. That's a policy question that's above, I think, all of not our pay grade, but our purview. Outside of our purview.
I mean, nuclear is making a comeback, right? And having been trained on reactors and stuff, it's one of those things that never understood why we didn't do more of it. But with microreactors and all that stuff coming now, hey, let's innovate that in the state. Let's deploy it. Let's build resiliency, right? So, okay, China hacks the power grid. We don't care so much because we've got microreactors everywhere. Now Connecticut is a state of resiliency and a state of cheap energy and things like that. But it starts building that equation of, right, all those things that have to line up to really bring the top people here and make it a renowned center of excellence for any industry in the world. We have to actually solve those, right?
Partner with Brookhaven on Long Island and turn on the one in Shoreham and pay for that 14-mile bridge that everyone's talking about, and we could have a whole.
I mean, you can start there, but also I'd say that's old tech. There's new reactors that are, some of the concepts are to just bury it, and you don't need a human to actually operate it. So you remove the human error problem on it, and you bury it, and it's producing steady state electricity for dozens of years, right? There's all these things out there, and there's some states who are leaning into it, and they're going to get all the talent. They're going to get the high-priced nuclear engineers with the cyber people that come along with them. So it's, if you don't start doing that, start at the policy level and say, what do we want 10 years from now?
Right.
Well, if we want these people, we have to actually create the environment that companies and individuals would want to come here in the first place, even starting with come here for school, right? But then stay here. So I just, from my standpoint, being here for 3.5 years so far, haven't seen all of those things come into play. But that's why what you guys are doing is, I think, so important. Is we need to look out 10 years and we need to have these conversations. And what are those things missing so that we can have the raw facts and data, so that policymakers can make it less political, right? And say, hey, we need X, Y, and Z. This isn't a red or blue thing. This is a state thing, right?
Right, and kind of
This is
back
a people
into
thing.
the rationale. So it's like, putting a specific goal, measuring or forecasting what that actually would impact, positive, negative, and everywhere in between, and then say, okay, these are the steps. That's really what this event's trying to get to, so we can avoid so much of that. Well, we can't do that because or we can't do, or this, this is inhibiting that. Okay, well, let's figure it all out. And over the next, decade, where things are going to move so much faster than that anyway. But how can we create something that is statistically relevant, with some level of accuracy that we can predict, a positive outcome.
Exactly.
So do you have, whether it's something that you're working on or that, is public knowledge, I won't push for it, right? But like something that isn't forefront of everyone's mind directly, but really has some early traction that could impact the state specifically, but, have a broader economic impact in general?
I think the biggest thing of everything that's coming down the pipe is how democratized it is, right? You start, all the tech coming down is something that really anybody can start to do, right? One of the things we just released was like the GitHub Spark effort. So now instead of needing GitHub as like, oh, it's just for programmers, literally in plain language, I can say, I need an app that will do X, and it will go do the programming for you, right? And I think that's what's going to be so game changing. Is it goes back to why I'm so hard on my kids for like, you need to learn how to read, because at the end of the day, if you can read and write, you can do anything, and that's where this future is. And it's a force multiplier, but it's also just really cool. Like, yeah, you can go learning a programming language now will be like a hobby. Like, I did it for fun. I didn't need to, but I did it for fun, right? But I think that's something that really enables everybody, not just in the state, but like every human now can go, like, all the excuses are gone, right? At the end of the day, like, go be a productive, useful human that's going to go solve a problem. Like, no longer can you say, oh, I don't know how to code. I can't code, or I can't do whatever. It's like the tools are literally there on your phone, and honestly, you don't even need to know how to write. If you can speak, you can speak it into your phone, and it will write it for you, and you can go solve problems, right? And so I think some of that becomes cultural, though, but it's like, you're empowered. Just go do it. It's cheap, and that a lot more of those things are less science projects, and they're coming down the pipe, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's a development platform like GitHub, the GitHub stuff, or whether it's just any of the use of these large language models, or it's how I'm doing home maintenance, even something simple like that, right? I used to have to go watch a video from Ask This Old House, and that was another one that brought me to Boston, was watching Ask This Old House on PBS back in the day. I was like, those guys are cool, and then a lot of them actually went to BU as well. So like, Miracle and Ask This Old House, that's what brought me to Boston originally. But you used to have to go watch one of those episodes and be like, okay, now I'm going to go fix my toilet or fix my faucet or whatever it is in your home. Yeah. Now I've got step-by-step instructions with a large language model in my pocket that also can create a picture of a diagram of what I actually need to do, right? It's I think that's just game changing for everybody.
And now is the time for people to really begin to test and build a competency, because it's not perfect yet, right? Like, you know, the vibe coding and agent creation and everything else, like there's still clunky points, but
keep in mind, this tech is only, that's what crazy thing, this tech is only 2.5 years old. Like, in reality, right, the whole, we had all forms of AI before, but the true large language model, I think that was such a game changer, was the way the large language model was created. It solved a lot of other technical problems, but like in reality, it's very new. So yeah, it's clunky, but like it's extremely powerful. So yeah, if you're not playing with it now, I mean, I've
Well, I think,
automated
like,
so many things in my home, like right with it, like yeah, exactly.
Well, I think opportunity-wise, like yes, there will be a point where it's stable and everyone can spin up a landing page for their kids' soccer team fundraiser in 12 seconds, right? But until that is literally one prompt, there's opportunity to kind of develop, models and businesses and ideas and concepts in that fringe.
Yep. I think the other thing that's interesting too, and something I've just thought about again, like going through Monroe, Trumbull area, like you just see businesses that are out there, and you think of like the overhead that's there, right? And so this is where I think there's some fear that people get with it too. It's like the AI is coming for my job, and what I've seen is, at least in the security side and really in these others, the AI has actually created more jobs, right? So yes, I can, did the dishwasher kill the need for somebody to be at the restaurant doing stuff? Like, no, it actually made me more efficient. I can spend more time cooking in the kitchen now because I don't need to wash all the dishes by hand, right? So it freed you up to do something else. I think that's what we're doing with a lot of the AI stuff is, okay, this, I would say not just look at you guys here, right? But like, how many people do you really need doing some of this stuff now? And like, what does that now free you up for if you don't need somebody to, you do certain, potentially mundane things and you automate some of that? It's not, oh, I don't need these people anymore. It's, what can I free them up to go do that's next level, that is unique, that then now expands, right? And if you think of it like that, I think there's so much potential for like a small town like Monroe that's like, hey, let's use AI to actually make it a force multiplier and make it a center of excellence, or a landing place for people. You don't need a big town to do this stuff anymore. You need people that have brilliant tech in their pockets that know how to use it, which also keeps the charm of some of these small towns, right? We can get more revenue and growth out of a small town without bringing in all the people and extra power utilities and other stuff that comes with it, and building more schools. Then it keeps the small town charm while also making everybody richer, right? So,
well, like this made me think about it because like I went down this dive like recently for some reason, right? But it's like everyone was worried about the jobs, going away, or what's going to happen. There was no Java developers in 1995, right?
Yep.
There was no App Store developers or iOS developers, or in 2006 there was AWS and cloud architects and DevOps, right? It was 2005, and you can go even into, there were no Uber drivers in whatever it was, 2012, right? There was, so all of these, yes, they change the dynamics, but they're opening up different jobs, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's part of, people just need to realize it's going to be an evolution. It's, and that happens. And
and it's just happening faster, right? Which again goes back to why I think at the end of the day, education is key, right? Not necessarily like formal brick and mortar education, but like keeping people up to date on this, right? It's everybody's got to play with it. Otherwise, at a national level, like we fall behind, right? Because to guarantee you, China's got people playing with AI every day in their schools. Because
chained to a desk,
of course, right?
Eyes taped open, like Clockwork Orange style.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's part of this competition, right? So it's like our strategic adversaries are using this tech. If we're not doing it for our own personal growth, like at some point, it's not just your job is replaced, your business is replaced, but the country could get replaced, right? And those are the longer term implications of it. So it's like if everybody's not just aware of the tech and how they could do this, think of it just small pizza shop. Okay, I've got 10 employees. Hey, if I can automate what 3 people are doing as overhead, I can actually compete more as a company. And now I use those 3 employees to make more pizzas, right? Like, it just drives everybody's efficiency up, which leads to bigger GDP, which leads the U.S. to, deter more wars and have a better, bigger place, and do what we got to do. So it's a trickle effect, right? But why
they're
is Connecticut
focused on
not the center of that, right? And I think what I bring it down to is the leaders of that are happening in Virginia or Texas or Seattle. Why not Connecticut, right? That's my thought on. There's no reason in my mind why we couldn't do it.
I mean, someone needs to, because otherwise we're not going to be able to compete at all if our focus is, just being the next influencer and singing underwater with, with the tutu on, right, or whatever, like the latest, like whatever this trend is.
Well, that's
like,
what they say about Connecticut.
Like swallowing Tide Pods until it's like, but then,
a lot of TikTok trends come out of Connecticut. Maybe that's not what we want to be known for.
So if there's just to kind of looking out to November 19th, I think, if you had that PA system and it could just hammer one thing into sort of everyone's mind or get them to stop and think hard about something, what would it be?
I mean, I would go back to, are you doing the basics? And that's from starting like from a cybersecurity standpoint, right? Is we can't even talk about growth and all these new things if you aren't doing the basics. And so do you actually know what is happening in your digital space that you're responsible for? Do you know who's allowed to do what? Do you know where your risk is transferred? Do you know what risk you've accepted? Like some of these basic things. And are you tracking that in real time? Have you done these hypotheticals of, okay, what if New York City gets attacked and we can't cross the GW? Well, what does that do to your business? What does that do to your supply chains? What does that do to fiber lines that go through New York City, right? And so like some of these conceptual things that are very real, I mean, it's kind of one of the disadvantages we have as a state is we're kind of just not even Connecticut, but New England in general is kind of stuck, right? There's not a lot of fiber line resilience because of the mountains of New York. It's either going through New York City or it's coming in underwater way upstate New York. Not a lot of resiliency there, right? So, but all these kind of come into account. So as a company or municipality or school, anybody with a digital footprint as a family, right? Like, where is your risk? And think about these. They might be 1%, never going to happen in a million-year hypotheticals, but if you think about those and you plan for them, it allows you to be ready for whatever does happen. And part of that is making sure you can defend what you have today, then gives you the telemetry and data you need to then innovate with more confidence going forward. So that's kind of what I would say is like, are you doing the basics? Think about these scenarios, right? It's from State Department, pretty well public fact is like we expect China to invade Taiwan in 2027, right? Like that's kind of what everybody's been thinking about. There's tons of books on it. So like, what does that look like? What would that happen to, what are they going to do in that? Are they going to come after water power? Are they going to come after schools? Can we survive that as a state first and foremost because keep in mind, people, that's why there's cybersecurity, right? There are people in the world that want to take you down and they're using cyberspace as that fifth domain for to do it. So do the basics first, have a solid foundation, and then use that data to innovate like crazy and move fast. But don't move fast when you've got low air in your tires and you want to go 150 miles an hour.
Right.
Like, you need to do the basics, make sure your car's good, and then go 150 miles an hour, right? And like go fast, get things done. So that's kind of what I would say. The basics just aren't being done still in any sector.
Take a step toward the basics. Don't try and put it all into one policy, right? Or like one initiative, right? Let's fix that and move to the next thing.
Exactly. And that's where, I mean, honestly, there are so many programs. Kind of goes to there's no excuse, right? There's so many programs that are free and open sourced out of CISA, the national labs, like companies like Microsoft or any of the big tech that like, hey, all these resources are there. Like, you literally just need to go do it and say, what's my network look like? Am I secure? Are my digital assets there? And so, yeah, it's all those barriers are gone. It's really just people drink the water, right?
Yeah.
The water's there. All these horses need to just drink it. So yeah, that's my megaphone thing is
Come drink.
drink the water
In Monroe.
that's there. Yes.
Well, Ian, thank you. And we look forward to talking more with you and seeing you at the event. And
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to meeting all the other great folks that you've got there and seeing what that level of, I would say, innovation and just desire. Right, there's a lot of folks in there that are
hopefully it'll cook
trying
up
to do
something.
it. Like we can come together and be like, yeah, here's the person that can solve our power problem. Here's the person that can build a data center. You're like, maybe they're all going to be there. So I'm hoping and I'm optimistic.
At the very least, maybe we'll come up with the next Xbox concept or something.
At least.
Yeah, there you go.
At least.
Well, thank you.
There you go.
good.
Yeah, thanks.